UCLA on March 15th. I should know that date. March 15th, 2018. Well, it's a beautiful day. The sunshine is shining. Eat your heart out, Northeast. And we're about to hear a debate on a very controversial topic, and that is whether we should let Syrian refugees enter the United States. Specifically, the wording of the resolution is the United States federal government should not allow Syrian refugees to enter the U.S. And that's what you should have written on your ballots, everyone. And you can go ahead and sign them now. Just don't fill out the decision yet. On speaking for the government side or the pro side is Monica. There's Monica. And for the opposition is Incia. We were beginning to worry about you, Incia, but here she is in the flesh. And so all is well that ends well. Welcome, Incia. Okay, you can start the time now.
This House believes that the U.S. federal government should not allow Syrian refugees to enter the United States. This policy debate case will be taken from the affirmative stance. What is the problem? Some Syrians are members of terrorist groups posing as Syrian refugees to infiltrate terrorist attacks. According to the 2017 Washington Times article, Islamic State finds success infiltrating its terrorists into refugee flows to the west. The history of mass migration shows that two members of ISIS that took part in the Paris massacre and the Christmas time truck carnage in Berlin posed as refugees from Syria. A terrorism analyst stated that ISIS has claimed on multiple occasions the intent to infiltrate terrorists into a refugee flow. In August, the deputy head of Bavaria's intelligence service told BBC that ISIS has injected hit squads via migrants entering Germany. An Islamic State operative told Britain's Daily Express that more than 4,000 fighters had already been smuggled into Europe. How big is the problem? According to the 2016 RAND article, the terrorism threat to the United States and implications for refugees, risks associated with refugees from Syria may be higher today for several reasons. First, Syria and neighboring Iraq have the highest numbers of foreign fighters on any modern jihadist battlefield, and there has already been an exodus of some of the fighters to the west. Second, several groups in the region, like Daesh, have planned to put operatives into the west, particularly in Europe, by having them seek political refugee status. Daesh has also been active in some refugee camps in Syria. Third, the U.S. intelligence community's understanding of extremists in Syria is worse than in many other jihadist battlefields, such as Iraq and Afghanistan, because of more limited intelligence collection capabilities. Why do we have the problem? According to the 2016 article, ISIS fighters virtually impossible to detect as group continues to use fake passports to exploit refugee crisis. It is virtually impossible for security officials to detect potential terrorists among refugees as ISIS continues to use the refugee crisis to smuggle its fighters into Europe. The terrorist group is known to use fake Syrian and Iraqi passports to disguise its recruits as they enter the continent, often via Turkey and Greece. That was the route taken by at least two of the terrorist attackers. A senior British intelligence official told the Telegraph that ISIS briefs its recruits and hands out fake documents in Raqqa to meet up with ISIL commanders where they receive training and new passports. They may then make their way back to Europe posing as migrants with new identities, making it virtually impossible for security officials to detect potential terrorists among those fleeing persecution. ISIS announced its intention to exploit the refugee crisis. Authorities in the country where thousands of asylum seekers continue to arrive on Asian islands every day admitted that verifying identities has been difficult with the volume of arrivals and the compulsory registrations and fingerprinting slipped during the summer peak. On the issue of fake documents, many are sold on Middle East markets. What is the solution? The solution I put forward today is to deny entry to all Syrian refugees into the United States and to resettle them in Syria's neighboring countries. According to a 2017 Perspective article, while countries surrounding Syria, such as Lebanon and Jordan, have taken in their fair share of refugees, others can do much more. Saudi Arabia, for example, is 10 times Syria's size and has a GDP per capita comparable to the U.S. Bringing Syrians halfway across the world into a country with a different language, different culture, and different traditions, instead of settling them in neighboring Arab countries, is not just a threat to the U.S. It is unfair to the refugees. They could be much more easily absorbed and have a greater chance of success in other Arab countries. Will the solution work? According to a 2017 article, the high cost of resettling Middle Eastern refugees. In the first 5 years in the United States, each refugee from the Middle East cost taxpayers approximately $64,370, 12 times the estimated cost to care for one refugee in neighboring Middle Eastern countries. The cost of resettlement includes heavy welfare use by Middle Eastern refugees. Costs also include processing refugees, assistance given to new refugees, and aid to refugee receiving communities. Given the high cost of resettling refugees in the U.S., providing for them in neighboring countries in the Middle East may be a more cost-effective way to help them. On average, each Middle Eastern refugee resettled in the U.S. cost an estimated $64,370 in the first 5 years. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees has requested $1,057 to care for each Syrian refugee annually in most countries neighboring Syria. For what it costs to resettle one Middle Eastern refugee in the U.S. for 5 years, about 12 refugees can be helped in the Middle East for 5 years. What are the advantages? First, we prevent members of terrorist groups posing as Syrian refugees from entering the U.S., protecting U.S. citizens from potential harm. Second, Syrian refugees won't have to forcefully flee almost 7,000 miles to a foreign country with a different language and culture. Lastly, we save the burden of spending high amounts of money to resettle Syrian refugees and provide them with welfare, jobs, and housing. On balance, what outweighs? Without a doubt, the advantages of not allowing Syrian refugees to enter the U.S. far outweighs the disadvantages. Given the high amounts of ISIS fighters who pose as Syrian refugees in order to infiltrate attacks, not allowing Syrian refugees to enter the U.S. is an effective solution in ensuring that individuals with any ties to terrorist groups do not enter our country. Ensuring the safety of American citizens from any harmful attacks is crucial. I now stand open for cross-examination and points of clarification.
Thank you very much. The chair will now recognize the leader of the opposition for a cross-examination not to exceed 2 minutes in length. Thank you.
I have a very simple question for you. The crux of your argument was that we should not allow Syrian refugees to
You're
enter
on the
country.
string. You gotta stand close together, please.
That you should not allow Syrian refugees to enter the country because they pose a terrorist threat.
Look at me.
Now, all the examples
Look at
that you've
me
given,
and see, I'm the king. You're trying to
All the-
persuade me.
all the examples that you've given so far are people who are Syrian refugees who have remote terrorist affiliations in Europe. However, the vetting process in America is much more thorough. There has been not a single evidence of a single Syrian refugee who has come into the United States who has even a remote affiliation with terrorist groups. Hence, this idea that Syrians who are coming into the country are terrorists is simply fear-mongering. So my question is, how does a terrorist threat remain a legitimate concern in the face of all contradicting facts of every single Syrian refugee who has come inside the United States, specifically because the vetting process of the United States is so thorough?
That was a mouthful.
Well,
Stay in the camera range, ma'am.
although it may be true that there is no evidence right now that there's Syrian refugees who pose terrorist threats in the U.S., there have been cases where, like the 9/11 attacks, where there were refugees from other countries who came into the U.S. and they put attacks in our country and killed a lot of people.
Okay, so just to follow up with that question, the people involved in the 9/11 attacks were not refugees, they were refined terrorists, and even with the vetting process that is installed within the United States today, it would be much easier for terrorists to come in the same way that 9/11 people did than as Syrian refugees. So why are you not allowing Syrian refugees to come into the country when they pose no terrorist threats? That's definitely not witnessed by the 9/11 attacks, because they were not refugees.
Well, it has happened in the attacks in France.
Okay, finish answering the question, and then you can sit down. In France.
In France, it has been the case that there have been Syrian people, like terrorists, who have been posing as Syrian refugees. And if it happens over there, how do you know it's not going to happen in the U.S.? Just because there's no evidence that it happened in the U.S. so far, doesn't mean that they're not plotting something against our country. You can't be certain about that.
Thank you so much. Would you hand me the The chair will now be happy in just a moment, as soon as he gets, would you pass the roll sheet around for one last roll in the hay?
Do you want the time for Monty's debate?
Yes, what was?
6:45.
6:45, very nice, okay, and 2 minutes, okay, just a minute, please, or a little more. And, who's the self-evaluation
Oh, right,
girl?
right.
Here, would you give her this folder here? Just a moment, please. And one thing I want you all to learn is when there's a delay in your chance to speak, you don't just stand up there idly. You ask the people around the room how their day was. Ask Mr. Jeff Sipple, how was your, what did you do last night? Stuff like that.
How's your day?
Still alright. Spent most of this morning and last night writing.
How's your week?
Other than the writing, pretty good.
How's your month?
The month as a whole, so far I'd say pretty great. The
What
whole
about
month.
the year?
Year? Too early to say. We're only in March.
Keep going.
Keep going.
That's what about your
My day?
Sure.
It's great. I had a fun little dance concert. I was excited for that. I made great breakfast because I went to sleep early. I'm here. Everything's fine. I'm not worrying in the world. You do great.
Okay, Chair will now hear the leader of the opposition for a speech not to exceed 7 minutes in length. You have to adjust the camera, sir.
Should I begin? Good afternoon, everyone. My debate today is not just about policy, it is about humanity. It is about our responsibility as humans to step up when we see heinous crimes being committed against innocent people, in this case Syrian refugees, who are displaced from their homes, whose children have suffocated in front of their own eyes, and who've been victims of oppression and war. People have the belief that refugees from Syria will bring and spread diseases, that they are uneducated and low-skilled, that crime and security threats will increase with their presence, and that they will not assimilate, thus creating the potential for ethnic clashes. The Obama administration only resettled 85,000 refugees the year it was trying to resettle 100,000. The Trump administration ultimately took in 53,000 refugees this past year, and in 2018, the first year it will have full control over the resettlement process, it wants to allow in fewer still. These are statistics quoted directly from the White House website. President Trump's administration has made it more difficult to take in Syrian refugees. President Trump's executive order in 2017 limits the number of refugees entering the country to 50,000 and even suspended the entry of Syrians indefinitely. An estimated 11 million Syrians have fled their homes since the outbreak of the Syrian civil war in March 2011. The refugee crisis is a global crisis that needs to be dealt with. The Syrian refugee crisis has been a direct consequence of the Syrian civil war, when in 2011, peaceful protesters were violently repressed by President Bashar al-Assad and the Syrian government. As the war progressed, Syrians have fled the war-torn region. According to the Associate Professor of Political Science, Tiffany Howard, in February 2017, the following national and international politics have contributed to the problem. NATO's delayed military response, hesitancy by the Arab League and the OIC to condemn and withdraw support of the Assad regime, and the failure of the Russian and Chinese government to withdraw military and financial aid from the Assad government. The United States is rejecting the very idea of a global refugee crisis. The Trump administration isn't just walking away from helping those people who would have been resettled under the Obama administration. It is walking away from the idea that any country ought to take moral leadership for refugees. And indeed, it's not clear if any country will. Now, what is the solution? The United States should take an open arms policy towards Syrian refugees, and the federal government should allow Syrian refugees to enter the country. That is, they should seek to take in as many Syrian refugees as possible, at the least going back to Obama's 100,000 refugees a year target. These refugees do not bring with them problems of terrorism and economic calamities that most people argue as reasons to prevent them from taking them in. This solution will work because the United States has comprehensive background checks and will not take in Syrians with terrorist affiliations, removing the threat of violence or terrorism infiltrating the United States. According to data from the Migration Policy Institute in 2016 on the current refugee resettlement program, it prioritizes the most vulnerable populations for resettlement, as well as those with the best prospects for long-term integration. Of the Syrian refugees admitted so far into the United States since the beginning of the conflict, 72% are women or children under the age of 14. Do you really think children under the age of 14 are going to pose severe terrorist threats to people? The Syrian refugees are also most likely to be of the school age. Furthermore, Syrian refugees do not pose a terrorist threat due to the heavy vetting process. Let me tell you a little bit about the heavy vetting process to take away your doubts. In total, the screening process takes an average of 18 months to 2 years and involves multiple federal intelligence and security agencies who carry out a series of security screenings and checks. The process begins with an initial vetting by the United Nations Refugee Agency. Prospective candidates are then referred to the United States, where officials from the State Department, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Defense Department conduct further vetting. Homeland Security Secretary Jed Johnson said recently that the department had added security checks to the process even further, as the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services are instructed to review the social medias of Syrian refugee applicants who are referred for more enhanced vetting. So these refugees are vetted on every single aspect that you can imagine. So there is no way that these refugees would pose a threat. Now, what are the advantages? According to Byman and Sleekman from the Brookings Institute in 2016, they concluded that an open arms policy would drive economic growth and urban revitalization in the United States. The only cost borne will be in the short term for resettlement and processing. In 2016, over 80% of refugees in the International Rescue Committee's early employment program were economically self-sufficient within 6 months. And refugees pay on average $21,000 more in taxes than they receive in government benefits. Hence, the argument that they are an economic burden in the long term is completely false, as shown by studies. Furthermore, refugee resettlements reflect American values, especially allowing America to remain the country that leads the world during a crisis. America taking in more refugees would also advance American strategic interests in the region, because its allies in Europe would be less likely to close their borders, shut down camps, and force refugees to return, which would be catastrophic for regional stability and security. Now, on balance, what outweighs? To not take in Syrian refugees is not only morally unacceptable, it is strategically a disastrous step for the United States to take. On balance, in taking Syrian refugees outweighs not taking them in, and the federal government should seriously reconsider its immoral, inhumane policies pertaining to Syrian refugees.
Thank you very much. Get in the brown square and say why you're there. I now stand open.
I now stand open to cross-examination
And points of clarification.
and points of clarification.
Okay, face the judge. That's who you're persuading. Good, thank you. Okay. Monica, rock and roll.
So you stated that there's a total of 11 million Syrian refugees who need to be resettled into the U.S.?
No. I said that there's a total of 11 million Syrian refugees in total, out of which, according to the open arms policy, a minimum of 100,000 would be resettled into the U.S., which is not even like 5% of the total refugee population.
But if the cost of maintaining a Syrian refugee costs about $64,000 per Syrian refugee, don't you think that it would be more cost effective to have like their neighboring countries resettle them over there, where they're comfortable?
I think there's a huge problem with the very statistics that you have, because their neighbors are already supporting a much huger population of the refugees, and because they have so many refugees, those countries are not able to sustain people. Hence, if the United States begins to share the burden, we are basically reducing the burden on the countries that are not able to already handle the refugees that exist within their borders. Furthermore, you're talking about $64,000. Why don't you talk about morality? Why don't you talk about the fact that these are people dying who need to be rescued, who are not even getting fed or resettled within those border countries that they are entering, because those countries cannot sustain those refugees?
Yeah, but there has been evidence showing that Saudi Arabia, one of the neighboring countries, didn't even take in any Syrian refugees. They have not done their fair share. So don't you think that those countries that haven't taken Syrian refugees should?
Do you know why those statistics reflect that? It's because Saudi Arabia does not take in Syrians as Syrian refugees. They directly give them employment visas. Hence, they are taking in people, but you're not seeing them go in as refugees. You're seeing them as people who are being taken in by Saudi Arabia and literally being accepted, given work opportunities, given employment, and being resettled at a very, very much higher cost to Saudi Arabia than just taking in a refugee.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Here. Now time for the leader of the opposition to take her seat. And we will now hear from the leader of the government to engage in a rebuttal. And we all know what the 4 steps of refutation are. 1, she said. 2, I disagree. 3, because. 4, therefore, we should not allow Syrian refugees.
3 minutes? 3 or 4?
Let's give her 4. Yeah, okay, go.
So my opponent states that we should take in Syrian refugees into the United States because our vetting system is very precise. I disagree, because I have found statistics showing that there have actually been instances where these refugees have been using fake passports, and they have actually been linked to ISIS and Daesh, and they have been they've been trying to pose as terrorists to infiltrate terrorist attacks. And
you
ISIS,
look up, please, sir, and pay attention.
in addition, ISIS has also admitted to vetting Syrian refugees, to having Syrian refugees slip through the refugee process in order to infiltrate these attacks. In addition, our vetting process is not entirely 100% accurate. We do not have information on every single human being that enters the country. Therefore, I believe that we should not let any Syrian refugees into our country, because they will pose a serious threat, and we should prioritize. In America, our main priority is to ensure the safety of our citizens.
Thank you. Wait. Your time wasn't up. I just said thank you for someone finally doing the 4 steps. If you have more rebuttal, if you have more rebuttal, you can give it. I just was pleased that someone finally did all 4 steps. It's very frustrating to me as a teacher to teach 4 steps and have people only give 3. I feel like I'm being ignored. Do you have more refutation?
I think I'm done.
Okay, well, there you have it, as Ray Breen would say. And now, Mr. Chair, I'm kicking something I shouldn't be kicking. The chair will now recognize the leader of the opposition for her closing refutation, which is done in 4 parts. Monica said, I disagree because, and therefore we should allow Syrian refugees to enter the U.S. And you obviously understand you can do that more than once.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Should I begin?
Please.
Okay. My opponent said that we should not let Syrian refugees in. I completely disagree because this is a moral, ethical, and strategic crime against humanity. Because Syrian refugees do not pose a terrorist threat at all when taking them into America, and therefore we must let them in. Now, the first thing that my opponent said about terrorist threats, I disagree with this because the vetting system is as thorough as it can be. She said that we don't have information on every single refugee we are taking in, but the fact is that we do. The fact that we spent $65,000 according to her information on every single refugee is going to knowing as much as we can about those refugees and knowing that they do not have any terrorist affiliations. Therefore, we know for a fact that those refugees are not affiliated to any terrorist organization with the best knowledge that we can have of any one person in the world not being affiliated with terrorist organizations. Therefore, we must take them in. She also said that she found evidence, my opponent also said that she found evidence that the refugees that are being taken in have fake passports and have been vetted by ISIS. However, I disagree because this information is false. There has not been a single refugee taken into the United States who is Syrian. This information, yes, while it is true that there have been refugees taken in by the United States in the past from Sudan who have engaged in violent crimes, there has not been a single Syrian refugee who has posed any sort of, even a criminal threat, let alone a violent terrorist threat, to any United States, within the United States. And this has been a fact, well, firstly because we have taken such few in, but also as a direct consequence of the fantastic, completely seal-proof vetting system that we have. Therefore, knowing that because of the 18-step vetting process, knowing due to the fact that it would actually be a lot easier for a terrorist to be coming in through any process other than being a refugee, if they really wanted to infiltrate America, and knowing that it is our moral, ethical, and strategic responsibility as citizens of this world, if not only of America, and to abide by our moral values, it is imperative, and therefore we must allow Syrian refugees to enter the United States. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And now it's time for the judges to do their job. Your ballots should already be filled out with the name of the resolution, the pro-advocate, Monica, skipping 2 lines down, the opposition, Incia, and then signing it with your name, and then saying whether you vote for the government or the opposition or the person, place, or thing. Thank you. Did you get my, you get my,
Professor?
Do I have all the ballots? No, they're still voting on it. Take your time, sir. You have about another 10 seconds. Is there any more ballots to come in?
Do you have more ballots? The ballot papers?
Who was the ballot boy or girl that I had with me? Tony? Was that you?
Yeah, I have some.
You have more?
Thank you.
By the way, if there were some late arrivals, we've collected the self-evaluation, the winning final, and the final policy paper. So if you could please get those out and pass them in, that would be fantastic. The decision was on a 5 to 15 vote goes to the opposition. We'll start with the hat from Hurley.
So my name's Amon. I voted for. Can I go? I voted.
Could
for
you project, please? You're way back there. Yeah. Communications class.
Oh, my name's Sapond. I voted.
Hi,
for the opposition.
Sapond.
I voted for Insia because she was a lot more enthusiastic. I thought she delivered her points really well. Her rebuttals were really good too, very clear. I immediately, it was a direct response to her points, which I thought she didn't respond well to. You did a lot better job of doing that. So yeah, rebuttals and enthusiasm.
Thank you, CPAN. By the way, it's helpful the more specific you can be, and if you can try to say something new that CPAN didn't already, so we don't repeat, if you can illuminate a new or different part of the debate. Well, yes, sir.
My name's Skylar, and
Hi, Skylar.
I voted for the opposition because she had a really good refutation or rebuttal, and just brought up a really good point about how they're like human beings as well. So there's something
Too many feet.
human beings.
We're human beings as well.
Oh, the Syrians are human
Yeah.
beings as well.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Great, okay. The humanitarian argument, okay. Great. Next, please.
Hi, my name's Alyssa. I voted
Hi,
for
Alyssa.
the opposition because I liked how in her refutation she brought up the point that Monica's evidence was just for Europe, but she was arguing for the U.S.
That's specific, thank you, Alyssa. That was something new and different. Thank you, Alyssa. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Jeff. I voted for the
Hi, Jeff.
opposition. I felt that she presented stronger evidence, and it seemed that her speech itself was almost kind of refutation, where it seemed to address many of the main points of the opposition, like, or of the proposition rather, like the point about the cost, and then the counterpoint of them being economically self-sufficient within 6 months afterwards. I thought that was a specific point that was strong.
Right. Interestingly enough, it was a strong point. It would have been even stronger had it been mentioned in rebuttals too. When you have such an important card like that, important piece of support, you want to emphasize it by mentioning it more than once. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
I voted for the opposition. I apologize, this has been said, but this was one of the deciding factors for me. I thought when Ncia brought up the whole morality of the issue, I think that's a really strong point. That's really hard to dispute, which I think put Monica at a bit of a disadvantage to begin with, because it's hard to argue with that. But I thought that was a really strong point that kind of put me over the edge for her.
Okay. I'm going to come back to that, and I want to talk a little bit about how you refute moral arguments that are seemingly one-sided. But yes, you're right, in this debate, Ucla was the good guy. Yes, good girl, I guess. Yeah, good woman. What's politically correct? I just don't know anymore.
Okay. So I voted for the opposition as well. I thought Ucla seemed very passionate and knowledgeable about her topic, the way that she interacted with both her evidence and then also Monica's evidence, specifically talking about Syrian border countries and their dealing with the issue. I thought that was really effective for her to be able to speak to that from her point of view.
Okay, that's a new point, the Saudi Arabian issue. Okay, thank you. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Linda.
Hi, Linda.
I voted for the opposition because Monica brought up the topic of how Europe lets in the Syrian refugees, and Ncia countered that with how the U.S. has a more longer process and it's more thorough, so the money that's spent on the background checks is actually being put to good use.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Hi, I'm Christina. I voted for
Hi,
proposition
Christina.
actually.
Great.
Because I enjoy.
Yeah, we're trying to hear one of Monica's advocates.
Yeah, I enjoyed her delivery. I thought it was better structured, and also the point where she made about like depending on other countries. And I don't know. I found that advantageous. So yeah, that was a good one.
Okay, thank
Hi,
you.
I'm Lena.
Your name is Thumbelina? No, it can't be. What's your name?
Lena.
Lena. Hi, Lena.
Hello. I voted for Ncia. I thought she hit every point. Her reputation, cross-examination was amazing. I liked how she argued against the 9/11, like, we're refugees. I didn't think that was a strong point, and I think Ncia did a very good job at backing up evidence for it. So, yeah.
Yeah, let me just, while we're all thinking about, it was the first time it was mentioned, but while we're all thinking about Incia's cross-examination, in a college debate in competition, you're allowed 15 seconds, and she would not have gotten away with making a 1-minute speech and then button hook a little question on the end of it. But she did, and it worked. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Brenna.
Hi, Brenna.
I voted for the proposition.
Great.
I thought Ucla was very animated in her delivery, which was really good. But I just wish there were more details to your plan versus just an open arms allowing everyone in. And I thought Monica provided a solution.
I'm Daniel, and I voted for Monica. She kept a calm demeanor throughout her presentation, and that projected an unbiased presentation towards me. That's what I voted for.
Yeah. It's interesting. The world of debate, we have what's known as a judge can decide a debate on matter, the content of the debate, or manner, how it was done or delivered. And many of you were commenting on the manner, and yet now we're hearing just a few people dissenting that maybe your manner was a little over the top, and so that's another thing to consider and to be aware of. Yeah. Because sometimes when you're too enthusiastic or too pushy, I've seen this in my courtroom consulting, the lawyers are particularly nasty, the jury turns on them. So, yes, please.
So I'm Francisco, and
Hi, Francisco.
I voted for Monica. I don't really like using morality in big decisions, so I didn't think that was a good argument. And I also liked how Monica, her solutions were better.
Okay, well, we clearly had two competing policies here for sure. It was clear Monica wanted to maintain the status quo or less, and India was going for a big body of Syrians to come on in. So that gives you all a big choice, which I'm sure that my friend Ahmad may want to mention a little bit about. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Serena.
Hi, Serena.
And I voted for Insia as well because her cross-sex, she refuted many points too, and I thought Monica did a good job, but I think if she spent a lot more time on her refutation, I would have been more convinced.
Yeah, maybe it was my fault as an instructor, and I apologize if I gave you the impression you were only allowed to do it once. You're supposed to do it many times, so I'm sorry about that. But the one you did was, I applauded you because you did it perfectly. I needed a few more, right?
Quality, not quantity.
Hi, I'm Elsie. I vote for Monica because during her debate, she's very passionate, and she emphasized the key words and make the argument very clear.
Okay, so you understood Monica more than Insia.
Yeah, kind of.
And to you, was Insia speaking a little too fast to be understood?
Yeah.
Okay. See, now we have an international audience here, and that's something to consider when you're doing your audience analysis. Is the audience needed to be a little slower? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Mary. I voted for opposition.
Hi, Mary.
I voted for opposition as well. I did like the points that proposition brought up, but the fact that Insia hit every single point during her refutation and cross-examination as well.
Right. And on that level, she seemed to have a better sense of clash and debating.
Exactly.
It wasn't just a few big large points, but more little points were hit. Yeah. That's a good point, Mary. That was a new one. Yes, please.
So we have another debate. You want to?
Yeah, we gotta move this along quickly. Yeah, we got another.
Hi, I'm Tatiana, and
Hi, Tatiana.
I also voted for opposition because I feel like her cross-examination was really effective, and I think she addressed every single point in her speech. It seemed like she did her research on the other side before when she was writing her speech.
Thank you. Does any one of the remaining four have something new to add? Because I don't want to deny you your moment in the sun. You want to make a couple of quick comments, and then we'll get to the next debate really quickly. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the tough spot on you, the burden that you have to face, and I think you could have drilled down a little bit more, saying why the U.S. You could have agreed with everything that she said, but why the U.S.? If you were to connect to build a moral link to say, you know, why do we have to assume the burden? If you drill down on that a little bit more, I thought that would be good. And also, you could have used that article that you cited about the Syrian operative that complied with the British Daily Journal, saying that ISIS or whoever said, they explicitly said, we sent over 4,000 undercover Syrians to the West. Like, if you'd have
used your own evidence.
Yeah, used your own evidence a little bit more. That would have been more powerful in the rebuttal, because she said she was demystifying they're not dangerous. And actually that's what you did really well. You demystified the notion that they were dangerous, that they're an economic burden. But what I would say for you is to focus on, instead of just throwing out morality in general, to bring it back to our American values and say, you know, give them the opportunity to chase the American dream, and make it a little bit more specific than I think morality would. Morality is important, and the tough thing with the opposition is that they have so many cards to play. Like you could have had an entire debate just on the humanitarian crisis, and you could have had an entire debate on the economic benefits, which I think you didn't really say how they would be an economic benefit. You just said they would get jobs after 6 months. If you were to say, like, you know, they've employed people, I don't know. There's some report that shows there's like 5,000 businesses that Syrian refugees started, if you were to use that a little bit more.
Yeah, there's evidence that they're entrepreneurs when they come in and they start businesses right away, and refugees are, good, job creators. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have focused. You did a great job on demystifying the notions. If you were to focus on, I think it would make your speech more powerful because it was so passionate, and I love that. Your delivery, I think, was great because you could hear it. You could hear your voice all the way in the back perfectly, and it seems like you're speaking to everybody. I would work on the delivery a little bit better for Monica. Yours was, it seemed very enthusiastic and passionate. It was really nice to hear. But to drill down to focus on one specific solution. I think you had so many that you were talking about that it would be a little bit more clear to understand. And that was, I think, your greatest strength is that you were so organized in your argumentation. It was very easy to follow along.
Let me say something really quick, and then can the next two debaters begin going up and putting their names on the board? Go ahead and put the camera up on the front, please. On the issue of when INSEA went with, INSEA didn't have to say, I'm bringing in 100,000. And I was surprised Monica didn't slap her around on that, because that's the number that got kicked into Germany. And we have some real empirics that sticking 100,000 people quickly into a country can be catastrophic. The rapes are up, the assimilation is down, the right-wing parties that wanted to kick out Merkel have come into being, and there's all kinds of anti-immigrant sentiment that has come in, not because of a gradual thing like Obama was doing, but because of, Merkel goes, bring them all, come on in, So that was, I wouldn't have done that. I would have, you could have still said, let's just continue the Obama system of slowly vetting and bringing them in, and we can have a smaller number and settling them. And they settle them all over the country in special homes and special communities where they have skills. So don't take your worst case scenario to win. We can get started, and you just need to stop this and restart. But the other thing is on the moral issue. You need to be prepared, okay, send us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, right? I was waiting to hear that, but we have a president and we have a sentiment in our country, not just from our president, from others that are suddenly questioning, why is this our problem, and why do we need, if it is our problem, why do we necessarily need to bring the problem to America? And this is what Monica was saying, I thought rather intelligently. Okay, maybe it is a problem, but we could spend the same amount of money and build a beautiful new city, or give all the money to Saudi Arabia or some other country and have beautiful settlements there. They don't necessarily all want to come here either. This is the other myth. Everyone wants to come to America, not necessarily. In any case, why is it our moral responsibility? Why just Syrians? Anyway, let's begin with the next debate, please. Can you turn this off? It's got to turn off to the, turn it off, turn the recording off. Yes.